Hello, and welcome to another season of the Storied Arcs podcast. I am your co-host, Mike.
And I'm your co-host, Alex.
And today we are doing our spoiler-free introduction to Letter 44, the entire series, which we'll be covering over the next 3 weeks. And today we're going to start with, here's the overview, here's the pitch of the series. Again, no spoilers. And then we'll get into discussing the creator team a little bit and the unorthodox publication history of this. Now, I will say, much love for Charles Soule. However, we did discuss him in our introduction to 8 Billion Genies, so we'll not be retreading his career, even though there's probably 15 minutes of discussion from what he's published since 8 Billion Genies.
I actually have a little list of the things that would have come out that are worthwhile checking out. A couple bullet points there.
He's an auto check it out guy for me, including his fiction, like his novels.
He's not absolutely. He is a fantastic writer. But it's been about, as we're recording this now, it's been about a little over 2 years since we did 8 Billion Genies. So he's had some new projects come out. So we'll touch on that a little bit right there, but also go through kind of the lengthy list of creators. They cycled through a lot of people, had some guest artists, but the book is Charles Soule as a writer and Alberto Jimenez, Alburquerque is the artist. They are the main. This is their book, but some of their the collaborators and support staff there kind of changed throughout its history, which you don't see as much sometimes with creator-owned books. But schedules are weird and people's workloads and how they come in and out, and especially if you bring in guest artists for kind of specific story reasons, as Letter 44 does, as we'll get to. That gets the creator list a little long.
Right. Okay. Would you like the synopsis from Image?
Yeah, let's do that.
I got to warn you, it is an atrocious run-on sentence. This whole
synopsis
not great.
Is
3 sentences. It's not a terrible pitch, but anyway. Okay, the cult favorite political sci-fi series collected for the first time in one complete volume. When newly elected president Stephen Blades is sworn into office, the last thing he expected to find on his desk was a letter written by the outgoing president, alerting him to a harrowing secret kept hidden from the world. 7 years ago, NASA discovered alien presence in the asteroid belt and sent a stealth mission crewed by 9 astronauts to make contact. President Blades has just become the most powerful man on the planet, but only this planet, mixing provocative political intrigue with high-stakes sci-fi action. Letter 44 is a gripping and complex look at leadership in the face of uncertainty. Actually, as far as introductions go, I think it's very rare for an introduction to a completed volume like this to not give anything more away than what the first issue covers.
I mean, but
it's a little like they don't really hint much at the direction.
They really don't, though. But I think it is a solid setup, because the idea of the contents of this letter, the idea, Letter 44, for those who may not be familiar, I'm sure most people listening are. It is tradition for when there's a changeover of power in the U.S. government that the outgoing president, and really kind of most outgoing offices, leave a letter for the new personnel coming in on the next term. So the letter is
presidential
written,
ones are famous, and sometimes they come out, post-mortem or something.
But the contents of this letter, which is going to in I'm sure we'll discuss when we get into it starting next week. Letter 44 refers to our president here, Stephen Blades, is now the 44th president. Take whatever real world comps in your knowledge of his history as far as you wish on that. So we'll probably get to that next week. But Letter 44 refers to the letter that was left for him, because on the envelope it is written 44, implying that it's for him. But yeah, the idea about the discovery of the aliens and the secret mission, like all that's laid out in the first 4 pages. So it isn't much of a spoiler to throw that out there and say this is the setup. But I think what the book does really well, and something I'm definitely excited to get into starting with our discussion next week, is that the book is so much more. It's not just about whatever sci-fi aspects of we have these astronauts in space who are dealing with first contact and all that. It really is. What was the line there? Like a political sci-fi, something
mixing
like that?
Political intrigue with high stakes sci-fi action.
Absolutely. And
I think a lesser
political
book
intrigue
would be
political
just
intrigue is so much important. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think a lesser book, when I was reading this, I was like, oh, how many, not to throw shade at them, but how many Image books are 6 12-issue series that would follow only the astronaut crew, the 9 people in space. which is interesting, but to add this extra layer to it, which is shades of Ex Machina, which we covered on the podcast, which is like
exactly what I was thinking.
the weekly political thriller.
Yes.
It's like watching an episode of The West Wing, except it's The West Wing meets Independence Day.
Well, and so my comp here, in a weird way, it was like it's The West Wing, like mixed with like Battlestar Galactica. Like there's equal time presented for both what's happening with the president and the political machinations and what it means to be president with this thing hanging over your head, literally, and time spent with our astronauts in space. You know, you're getting in a full picture of kind of what the world is like. And you're right. I think there are a lot of books that would give you the premise and then would only show you one of those and wouldn't try to juggle kind of back and forth between the two settings, as it were. So yeah, I think it is an intriguing premise and one that I mean, this is a book that I started reading a while back after, like, I read some of Charles Soule's other stuff, kind of more recent stuff, and then came back to this book and never actually finished it, probably for a number of scheduling reasons of reading 1,000 other books, until Mike and I had like a mind meld moment where like, this book seems interesting. I was like, yeah, I was thinking about that too. So I'm glad to go back.
But neither of us have finished it. Well, you may have by this point. But
yeah. So, but yeah. So I mean, this book isn't super old. We'll talk about it a little bit here. So, what Mike just read was the synopsis for the compendium, which, as we're recording this, just came out in July of 2025, only about a month ago, and that was released on Image, and that's all 35 issues. And we'll probably be using that. We're going to divide that up in 3 sections. We'll probably be using that since that's the most easily accessible version. But when this book first came out in single issue, it came out on Oni Press, starting back in October 2013. So again, not a super old book, but I think you can tell kind of the world in which it was birthed into as you kind of read it. But as I mentioned, it's 35 issues, ran from October 2013 to August 2017. Initially, there were 6 trades that it came out in. There were basically 5 volumes of story. But what they did is every like 7 issues, about approximately so, issue 7, 14, 21, 28, and 32 were standalone issues. And I mentioned the guest artists at the top here. That's what they brought the guest artists in for. And those were kind of standalone issues that just told kind of the backstory of some of our astronauts and other characters that just gives you more info on kind of how they got into the program and where they were before joining this mission. And what they did was they took all those issues and collected them into what became Trade Volume 5. So if you read this in single issue, you would have read issues 1 through 6, then 8 through 13, then 15 to 20, 22 to 27. Those are the first 4 volumes. And then you would have gotten those 5 standalones there, which would have been 7, 14, 21, 28, 32. And then you would have read volume 6, which is 29 to 31, and then 33 to 35. So it's a bit of chopped up way to read it. Obviously they grouped that for like story cohesion, I guess. So in that way, I guess it kind of makes sense. But after they had those kind of traditional trades out, Oni did publish 3 deluxe editions, which collected the 35 issue series in 3 chunks, and they collected them fully chronologically. So Deluxe Volume 1 was issues 1 through 12. Volume 2 was 13 to 24, and Volume 3 was 25 to 35. And that breakdown is how Mike and I are going to be talking about this book. But again, we'll probably be using the compendium. So we'll just like stop at, we'll tell you what issues to stop at. You can probably find the deluxe editions. Maybe you can find the trades as well. I don't know what the actual like print availability is now, because it is shifted from Oni to Image, which has happened a lot with creator-owned series. Maybe not a lot, but it happens often enough where, you know, creators have a book at a series, and then at the end of its contract or whatever, it runs out, rights revert back to the creator, or they get them back somehow, and then they take them to maybe wherever they're doing work at the moment. Charles Soule has done the majority of his more recent creator-owned work at Image, so it kind of made sense to bring that all under one roof, I guess, which is probably why they went in and he brought Letter 44 to Image, and then now that they've now produced their own volume, this beautiful compendium. It happens a lot. I said two of my all-time favorite series, like all-time, Criminal and Astro City, have multiple publication spots. Criminal started out at Icon, which was the creator-owned imprint at Marvel, before eventually moving over to Image when Brubaker and Phillips signed that deal. Astro City started out on Homage Comics, which was a part of Image, which then became an imprint of Wildstorm, which then went to DC when Wildstorm went to DC, and then eventually came out on Vertigo, only to go back to Image when the rights went back to Curb Music and Company. So it happens a lot, and so you can get volumes that have different publishers on the spine and whatnot. But Image is the current home for Letter 44 and the version we're going to be reading. But it does, because of its original publication history, this does mean we check another publisher off our non-existent publisher list here, and then we can talk a little bit about Oni Press. Do you have any history reading books from Oni that you're aware of, Mike?
Oh boy, I mean, I know I have something in my box, so I'm just frantically now typing it in.
I can probably guess a recent book you have.
I bet you can, although some of these things I don't always pay attention. Like when I'm following a creator, I buy them wherever they go, and I'm not paying attention to the publisher. So I was wondering if there's a way to sort my collection on Comic Geeks, which is what I have up on my other screen.
You can, yeah. You should have sort by publisher. One of the options on the right hand column there. But the book I was gonna guess is out of Alcatraz.
Yes,
Christopher Cantwell and Tyler Cook. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a recent book that
I have a total of 14 single issues from Oni Press, including the whole Sesame Street thing they did last year.
Right.
They're
Survival Street, right?
No. They're actual Sesame Street branded books.
Okay.
Yeah, no, and they are actually like kids comic books.
Sure.
But my daughter likes Sesame Street, so I was like, let's get these. And the cool thing is the C cover for each of the books, which I don't think was a retailer incentive, it was just the C variant, was a cardstock black and white coloring book version of the main cover.
Oh, nice.
And
nice. So kids could, that's cool. That's fun.
It was like, man, if you're going to do a Sesame Street comic book, absolutely do that.
Go all in, yeah.
Free for All, Patrick Horvath's not follow-up book, but his latest book.
His standalone one shot, from Beneath the Trees, that was a great fun read, yeah.
And then actually a book strangely enough, another book I was going to suggest, except this time Alex and I had agreed we wanted to do like camp out for 3 or 4 weeks on one book because we've had an exhausting summer of all those different books. Faceless and the Family by Matt Lesniewski, I think is how you say his name. It's a really long name.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I actually would love to, like, that's only, that's a 1 week thing. And then he wrote a little OGN that's like very Lemire-esque that I really like. So I was like, yeah, well, maybe if we ever do him, we'll do 2 of his books. Then I have the Autumn Kingdom, Colin Bunn, and Out of Alcatraz.
Yeah. So Oni Press has been around for a while. They founded in '97. Published kind of a steady stream of books. In 2019, they merged with Lion Forge, another kind of very small kind of indie press publishing company. And after that, they became a subsidiary of a company called Polarity, which was formed as like a media company. And what they ended up doing was all the comic stuff, they had Oni and they had Lion Forge. They shifted all of the comic publishing under the Oni franchise. And I think they still use Lion Forge for some things, but not comics anymore. So anything that Polarity and their subsequent companies publish for comics, it's under the Oni Press imprint now. I think the most notable title, anyone they're listening, if you're like, I don't know anything from Oni Press, Scott Pilgrim. Brian Lee O'Malley's book is an Oni Press book.
That explains that I don't have my trades in Comic Geeks. So
well, you should do that. They have that there.
I know they're all in CLZ, and I got to move them over, and it's like a whole thing. If anyone's looking to do charitable work, that's what I'm going to do on my paternity leave in October.
Yeah. So Scott Pilgrim, probably the most well known. If anyone says they may not know the book was on Oni, but that's probably the book that most people have heard of. The Rick and Morty comics are all on Oni.
Oh, sure.
Rick,
yeah, and our friend Kyle Starks did some of those.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
done a bunch of stuff there. A great book that I love, The Sixth Gun, a great series called The Sixth Gun by Cullen Bunn and Brian Hurt, a book that just recently came back. That's that was an ongoing series, had some mini series. It's a really, really cool world. That's an Oni book, an Oni Press book. There's a handful of books written by Greg Rucka. Oni, I'm assuming they still are, but they were headquartered in Portland. Greg Rucka is a very proud Portlandier, or whatever we call those people.
Is there any other kind of Portlandier?
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, so it makes sense. He's kind of brand loyal to a creator-owned company in his hometown. Book Queen and Country, which he did with a bunch of different artists. Each volume he did with a different artist. This book called Whiteout he did with Steve Lieber, and Stumptown, which he did with Matthew Southworth for the kind of the initial run, and then I think there was a final series he did with Justin Greenwood. So Rucka's done some books out there, which is very cool to see. This book called Wasteland that I've never actually read, but I know one of the creators, Anthony Johnson, was the writer, and he did that book with Christopher Mitten. Anthony Johnson also did the book The Coldest City, which is also on Oni, the book that became Atomic Blonde.
Right.
But there's a
I always
follow-up
get
too.
Coldest City and Coldest Winter mixed up, but they're like two halves.
I think Coldest Winter is the sequel, the follow up. Not quite as good in my opinion, but Coldest City is really cool. Not quite as slick as what Atomic Blonde made it be, but it was a lot of fun. And then there's a really fun book that I want to call out. It's an all ages book. Maybe your daughter, when she goes up a little more into reading, a book called Jana and the Impossible Monsters. It's by Chris and Laura Somney. Chris Somney, the great, incredible, talented artist. Him and his wife wrote this book. He draws it. Really, really fun, kind of all ages book about a pair of sisters going on an adventure. So that's a really cool book to check out if you've got younger readers. And even if you're not, just want to read a good story. It's something to go read. Jana and the Impossible Monsters, go check it out. So yeah, that's our look at Oni here. And part of me wonders if maybe in some of the changeover of Oni merging with Lionforge and all that, or maybe they're just how the contract that Sewell and Alburquerque had with this book in terms of how and when those rights revert back to them, for them to then, I'm sure, I feel like some of that is, because it is a creator-owned thing, you can't just, I'm sure you can't just like take it willy-nilly, but at some point those rights come back to you. And I'm glad they did, because now we get this really beautiful new compendium out for that image put out. I guess because they know this is a book that probably is a little underread in terms of people who have read Charles Soule's stuff. He is a much bigger name now in comics than he was when this book started in 2013, given all the work he's done at Marvel, everything he's done with the Star Wars universe, his Image books, his creator-owned stuff in Image, especially his stuff with Ryan Brown, like we talked about, 8 Billion Genies, Curse Words, their newest book that's ongoing called Lucky Devils. So he's a much bigger name now. So it does kind of make sense for Image to come in and say, hey, let's put out a collection of an earlier work, maybe a slightly lesser known work, and you can capitalize on people who maybe know Charles Soule's work but haven't read all the back catalog. It makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. So should we get into the creative team a bit? You said you had a quick catch up on Charles Soule. Let's just rip that one off.
We'll do that real quick. Like I mentioned, when we did 8 Billion Genies, that was like April, May of 2023. So in that time, I just mentioned the book Lucky Devils. That's his next book, his current book with Ryan Brown, his collaborator on 8 Billion Genies. That's ongoing right now. He still is writing Star Wars titles over at Marvel. The High Republic era that he helped kind of usher in and was kind of one of the main driving forces behind that is just very recently kind of winded down, or is in the process of winding down, kind of the last chapter of that. And he wrote a new book, new prose book, which may or may not have mentioned back. It may have been announced when we did 8 Billion Genies Zero episode. I'm not quite certain, but it's called The Endless Vessel, which is a book that I have sitting on my to-read pile and I haven't gotten to.
Oh, I
Been
read
sitting
it,
there
and I
for
think
a
you
year
will
now.
like it.
Okay, yeah. I read his other books, The Oracle Year and Anyone, which they have this kind of light, breezy, real quick, kind of light sci-fi read to them, are really great, really good characters. So I'm sure I'll enjoy it. It's just there's like 45 other prose books I got to read, plus all the comics to get to. So, but I have it. It's sitting there, and I will get to it at some point because I have enjoyed all of his prose writing.
Yeah. Phenomenal mind. I mean, I think basically what you need to know about him is that before he wrote comics, he was an attorney.
Yeah.
And I think that has a lot of bearing on his did I get the order of that wrong?
No. Well, he is also a musician.
Yeah, he's a musician as well.
Musician,
I see
former
less of
lawyer,
that
comic writer.
in his comics. But
well, you should read 27.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
But that's true. But you read his like Daredevil, and it's like, or She-Hulk. It's like he literally is writing an attorney,
leaning right into the legal aspect.
The funniest gag in 8 Billion Genies is the guys who are taking their wish through a bunch of attorneys to help them like craft the perfect wish that has no loopholes, and they are like 40 pages long that they have to read this whole thing in one run.
It's like a 10-foot scroll of
right.
But he's also very much clearly an old school science fiction fan. Obviously, his fiction, as you mentioned, his prose fiction has a science fiction bent. There is a ton.
Did you see the blurb on this book from a guy at NASA?
Yes, well, there's a ton of obvious science fiction references in this book here. You know, he co-writes Undiscovered Country with Scott Snyder. That has dystopian science fiction aspects to it. So it clearly is a passion of his in terms of, I'm assuming, kind of the media he grew up with and ingested. And you mix that with the musician aspect, the lawyer aspect, all of that, you get a really weird soup of stuff. That comes out real eclectic, real versatile, I think, which I think is what I really enjoy about it. And also, again, he spent many years writing the mainline Star Wars title. So on top of the kind of the hard sci-fi, he's also well immersed in kind of your more light fantasy sci-fi stuff that is Star Wars.
And so beloved Star Wars comics, right?
He has been a part, for the most part, been writing since they got it back in some capacity, and then he took over the mainline title. He's not writing as much now. Great writer Alex Segura is writing the mainline Star Wars title, but yeah, he spent like 4 or 5 years writing the main and crafting the story, the canon story of the Star Wars comics. So yeah, listen, he's super versatile, can do a lot of stuff, and I think it's why he ranks as one of yours and mine kind of favorite writers right now. As you said, like he's like a season pass kind of writer. You see his name on something, you're going to check it out because there's going to be something interesting about it that his perspective brings. So,
and this was like I'm holding a $50 compendium that was a blind buy. It was like I got a pre-order discount on it from a website, and they were like, you know, you could have this whole compendium for $32, and I was like, look, if I were in a used comic shop and I found a full run of a Charles Soule thing for $1 an issue, I would buy it. And this is that.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
For $32. It's like, that's exactly what it was.
Yep. So no, he is one of those writers, I think, for both you and I think because of that very eclectic background, he brings this different perspective into his writing, which I think is really, really cool. So yeah, that was allegedly our quick catch up on Charles Soule. If you want a little more detail, go back to that 8 Billion Genies Zero episode that we did for him and Ryan Brown a couple years ago.
Which, by the way, 8 Billion Genies is one of our most downloaded episodes.
That book is so fun. It's a book that I still go back to. Of Soule's books, I think that's the one I will go back to and just flip through, read sections again, because I think is kind of the height of his kind of absurdist humor with like real emotional feeling writing, character writing. This book is a little less absurd. There's still funny moments, but this actually is a fairly serious, that feels like a weird term. You know what I'm saying? Like there isn't the level of absurdity that I think some of his more fantastical books, like the stuff he does with Ryan Brown, curse words, 8 billion genies, lucky
Right.
devils. They have a level of built-in absurdity to them. This book is a little more straightforward. It's a little harder sci-fi. It's harder political and harder sci-fi. I think West Wing is a great example for the political machination side, and your sci-fi is in a lot of ways closer to it's closer to like a Star Trek or 2001 or something like that. It's very Arthur C. Clarke, which is fitting given what the ship is named in the book. But we'll get to that later. So, but that's enough on Soul, our writer. I mentioned earlier our artist here, Alberto Jimenez Alburquerque. He's a Spanish artist. Does work mostly in Europe. I think his bio says he lives in Madrid, or at least did at the time. Done a lot of work in Europe. Done a handful of stuff here in the States and in kind of North American comics. A lot of stuff, mainly mainstream wise, over at Marvel. Maybe most notably, he did the most recent series of Web of Spider-Man, WEB of Spider-Man, with writer Kevin Shinick. It's a alt-universe Spider-Man that ties into the Avengers campus at Disney's California Adventures over in LA next to Disneyland. It's a little 5-6 issue miniseries that ties into, because when you go over there, there's a Spider-Man section, and a lot of things in the comic kind of tie into that. So, that's corporate synergy, I guess. But it was a fun little book. It's notable in that the kid from Iron Man 3, Harley Keener, the little kid he meets in Tennessee, he makes his comic appearance, not as a character named Harley Keener appears
right.
in Web of Spider-Man #1 from 2021. So it is notable in that way, in that not a direct tie-in with the movies per se. At least I don't think it's meant to be the same character, same kid. Maybe it is. I'm not quite certain. But these books aren't set in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So, but it's a fun little, Spider-Man story, kind of all ages. Bunch of kids going into learning about science, technology, and things like that. It's great. It's a lot of fun. Albuquerque also had a little mini run on New Mutants during the Krakoan era a couple years back. Done a lot of stuff with short stories, anthologies, backup stories. He's done a lot of covers, main covers, variant covers, a lot of things you expect an artist, when they're kind of in the stable to do. He also has done some Infinity comics, which are Marvel's like webtoon, the Infinite Scroll vertical comics. He's done some for X-Men and for Spider-Bot. Spider-Bot ties back into the Web of Spider-Man book, but that's a completely different style of
it's a different style of sequential art. Yeah.
So the ability because it isn't just cut and paste, or not just, you can't just cut a traditional comic and put it vertically. The way it scrolls influences how you read. So he has the versatility kind of to go back and do both those, which I think is pretty cool. Over at Image, I think the most notable book is a book called The Bloody Dozen, A Tale of the Shrouded College, which is a book he did with Charles Soule again. The Bloody Dozen, The Shrouded College, being a spin-off of a book that Soule did with Will Sliney. Maybe it's Slimy, not quite certain, called Hell to Pay. The Shrouded College is an entity in that book, and they've released a handful of little miniseries that tie in or spin-offs, and Albuquerque worked with Soule again on one of those a few years back, which is cool. Again, the idea of guy you worked with before, bringing them back to do another project. You started with someone else, but collaborate again, tell a different story, kind of get that creative juices flowing again, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah. Two things of his that I have in my box, which I didn't realize were him, where I probably not the whole run, but I've got the Chip Zdarsky Batman Urban Legends, and he was a spot artist on there, but I think he did like 6 or 7 issues.
Well, yeah. So Urban Legends was kind of an anthology book,
right?
Yeah, yes. yeah. And so
which means, so he's not. You can't say he's like the series artist.
But
still, to work with Chip is great.
Yeah. Well, and there were those were done where like a lot of times they were short episodic stories that you would read, so you like.
But it went to like 18 issues, and I couldn't believe it was still going. I was I kind of thought this was a 6 issue.
Yeah,
I thought it was kind of like when they do like, Elektra, Black, White, and Red or something, and they're going to do like six anthology type things.
It is similar to that, where you just bring in creative teams to tell short stories.
Which,
And
by
the
the way,
urban legends sometimes they were episodic, where they would run a story would run across, run for like 8 pages. It would run across like 4 issues or something like that.
Right. It's very old school in the method, although
Definitely.
Like back in the day, I think those would have been 100-page things, with
or
a bunch of
50-page giants
stories.
or something like that. Yeah.
The other book, I have the first issue and loved it, but abandoned it because of the same reason of Bylines and Blood. It's on Aftershock. Mm-hmm. Did you ever pick up A Calculated Man by Paul Tobin?
I did not. That's on my list here. He did it. He's
very cool book, but I don't know if it's finished or not, because Aftershock went down, and it was funny because you were talking about the original imprint going down and then moving, and we had talked to Erica Schultz about that, like, is that going to happen? And she was very tight-lipped about it. Like, obviously she would like it to happen, but the Aftershock thing is such a huge lawsuit, apparently still ongoing for people getting paid. Like years and years later.
I after we spoke with Erica, maybe a little while later, I was at a con, and I spoke with artist Patrick O'Leaf, who drew a book that I really love on Aftershock called Rough Riders, and asked the same question about, hey, is there any chance you could do this a third series? And like, he sighed so heavily. He was like, I would love to. We have an idea for a third series, but like, we don't know what's going on with Aftershock, because it's all about people having gotten paid for their work, and so they don't know who owns the rights, and so rights can't transfer over if they're caught in limbo. So, but yeah, Calculated Man was on Aftershock with Paul Tobin. He did another book with Paul Tobin called Mystery Girl, which is over at Dark Horse. So again, you see him you see Alburquerque working with similar writers and collaborators over and over again, which again I think is pretty cool. He has real minimal DC work, very similar to some of the anthologies and short stories and backups and stuff that that he had done at Marvel, but that's mostly what his DC work is right there. Just if you pick up like you mentioned, the urban legends or things like that, some of their anthologies, that's where you'll find some of his DC work, but not a ton there. But most of the stuff he's done, a lot of it's over in Europe, but in North America, you're going to mostly find some level of creator-owned work that he's done.
Yeah. So anyway, very talented guy. I think he's had a few tough breaks, between Oni Press and Aftershock. This one worked out.
Yeah, this one working fine. Like I said, he still has kept up a collaboration with Soul. They said that Bloody Dozen, that Shrouded College Tale is this year or just last year. So maybe and now that Letter 44 is at Image, maybe those guys, Soul and Albuquerque, have another book together. Maybe doing this Hell to Pay spinoff was like a get our feet wet together again in terms of working together. And who knows, maybe they got something else on the line. I wouldn't put it past them to maybe have something, a whole new story, whatever, something new coming down the line now that their previous collaboration is under one roof with the rest of Soul's work. I think that'd be really cool. And if it shows up on the solicitations at some point, I'm going to pick it up. Like, just I don't care what it is. If these guys are working together again, I'm gonna jump on it. So yeah, that's our artist here, Alberto Jimenez Alburquerque, which is really cool. So after that, there's a bunch of people that worked kind of with them, a bunch of collaborators, because again, as I mentioned, they cycled through a lot of people. So the original colorist. Yeah, the original colorist on the book was Guy Major. He colored the first 3 issues, did a ton of DC work in like the 2000s, 2010s, pretty much worked on every title, every character, every book, put his titles to. Over at Dark Horse, did a lot of work on the Buffyverse books, which I guess if you were working at Dark Horse in the 2000s, you probably worked on the Buffy books at some point. So not super shocking there.
Yeah.
And outside of those 2 major publishers, it's real kind of scattered. Did some stuff at Aftershock, at Dynamite, some other Image books, a little bit of Marvel here and there. But Major's most work, his majority of his work was at DC. But again, he only colored the first 3 issues. After that, they got Dan Jackson, who was essentially the colorist from issue 4 onward to 35. Also a lot of stuff at Dark Horse. Mostly licensed work, like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the Star Wars books when Dark Horse had them, Stranger Things, Aliens, so even some more recent stuff at Dark Horse, not just like 15, 20 years ago stuff. A lot of work at Boom as well. More licensed work like Buffy over at Boom. Dune, Labyrinth, they have a lot of those titles there now. Also some creator-owned stuff like The Seasons Have Teeth, and kind of the third version of a book called Abbott. It's called Abbott with a year after it. This third book was Abbott 1979. It's a book written by Saladin Ahmed, which is really, really cool. And then scattered work here and there elsewhere. So most of his stuff is at Dark Horse and at Boom. And a lot of creator-owned stuff and licensed stuff. A book like Letter 44. The third colorist is Sarah Stern, who is credited with coloring 2 issues, 24 and 29. I'm guessing maybe that was a bit of a fill-in. Maybe there's a scheduling mix up or kind of tie up or something like that, where maybe needs help to come in. But she came in just colored those two issues. So obviously call them out because they contribute to the book here. Done a lot of work at Boom. Power Rangers. The other thing, if you're at Boom, you probably work on is Power Rangers, and a really, really fun book called Goldie Vance. It's kind of an all ages, like teen detective book, set back, I want to say like in the 50s or something like that. It's a really, really fun book, really, really cute book, written by Hope Larson. Over at DC, she worked on Batgirls, mainly because a lot of her credits, she is coloring Jorge Corona, who is one of my favorite artists.
Yeah.
Who was doing when the current Batgirls book restarted. He was doing the art for that, and then can he do the covers on that? If Corona does a cover for any publisher, or like his work on at Image on like Transformers and things like that, Sarah Stern colors him, which I think is pretty cool. That you're someone that she works with over and over again, and it's an artist that I really, really love in Jorge Corona. So yeah, most of the issues we're seeing going to be colored by Dan Jackson, but anything he's doing, he's following the lead of Guy Major, who started initially kind of setting what the color palette would look like on Earth and in space and things like that.
Yeah. Oh, I knew you were a Jorge Corona fan.
Yeah.
And I can't believe we haven't done a Jorge Corona book yet.
Yeah,
I think we kicked around the Scotty Young one a few times.
But there's a couple. He's
Middle West.
with Scotty Young. Yeah, Middle West would be really cool. Actually, there's a book that could have kind of fit in with Social Media Summer. A book he did called Number One with a Bullet, that has this kind of social media streaming kind of fixture to it. Maybe could have been potentially tangential to that theme, but yeah, I'm a huge fan of his. I love his art. He's someone that if he's got a variant cover to a book, I'll consider it. I'll always look at it and see, oh wait, Corona's on the cover. I'll check it out and see what it looks like. So his work on Transformers with Daniel Warren Johnson has been really, really cool. Seeing his art with Optimus Prime and Megatron and Starscream and stuff like that, really, really cool. Very, very fun to see as a longtime Transformer fan. That's really, really fun. So, but yeah, so those are our colorists. Then I guess we have our 2 different letterers. Once again, we had an original letterer, Sean De Pascali. I'm going to go with that. He was the original lettered the first 6 issues, and then from 7 onward, they went with Crank. We've talked about Crank a little bit. He lettered 8 Billion Genies and Revival, 2 books that we've covered on this show. Most of his work is done with Oni and Image. Also believe he's a Cincinnati guy. I'm pretty sure he's local to both of us. But the original letterer...
Yeah, I met him.
Yeah, he's... been to some shows, I think, locally, and been around.
He went to the one micro show around here that I went to, and he was like the biggest name there. It's like a Highland Heights, It was very small. But Kyle Starks was there, and it was like a couple good names they got.
Well, I said he said he works. He letters a lot of Souls work. He letters a lot of Tim Seeley work sometimes. So he is someone that does a lot of creator-owned book, and almost exclusively creator-owned stuff, which again I think is pretty cool. De Pascali, the original letterer, minimal mainstream work. I think the most notable work he's done, at least relevant here, I mentioned 27, which is an early book that Charles Soule wrote. There's 2 volumes. It's 27 and 27 colon the second set. It's about a musician who essentially sells his soul to become part of the 27 Club, which is the mythical age in which great artists die.
Oh yes, right.
Kurt Cobain, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, yeah, list goes on and on and on. So that's where some of Soule's music influence can be seen there. But De Pascali, he lettered that book, which is probably why it was brought on initially, at least for this one. He has a history of working with Soule. So, but again, starting at issue 7, going all the way to the end, Crank was on the letters there. So yeah, that's our main team there. And we'll talk a little bit more about these guest artists when we get to those issues in terms of
maybe why you just want to do a name drop just to
exactly
put them on the radar.
Yeah. Issue 7. At the time, someone that people probably didn't know when this issue came out, but issue 7 was drawn by Joelle Jones, who is now a major name in comics. A couple years after this, she'd be drawing Batman and writing and drawing a mainline Catwoman title. So just an incredible amount of work over at DC. Also a really cool book. Joelle Jones, also someone we should probably look into. And who knows, maybe this book that I really love called Lady Killer. 2 volumes of this book over at Dark Horse. She drew the first volume and then wrote and drew the second one, or maybe co-wrote and drew the second volume. But it's a really, really cool book. But at the time this book came out again, she was not a name that people knew. Now she's arguably one of the bigger names associated with this book. That was issue 7, which is the first standalone kind of one-shot issue. Issue 14 is drawn by Drew Moss. Done a lot of work over at Dynamite, like a lot of licensed work like Thundercats, Gargoyles, Vampirella, Red Sonja, a lot of those licensed work there. He also did some of the later issues on a really cool book over at Image called Copperhead. He wasn't the original artist on that, but he came in at the end. I think it did either the last arc or kind of an arc later in the series there. Maybe for scheduling purposes, he was brought in for that. But that's a really cool book written by Jay Faber over at Image. Issue 21. It's drawn by Ryan Kelly, an artist that we just talked about recently. He was the artist on issue 10 of Unfollow, which is one of the kind of standalone issues there. Has some other DC and Vertigo work besides Unfollow, and he's also the artist on a book with Cy Spurrier over at Image called Cry Havoc, a book that Mike and I have talked about a little bit. As maybe even a potential one we might cover at some point, at least one that you threw out there. But Ryan Kelly is the artist on that. He's issue 21, which is the third of our standalones. Issue 28 by, I'm going to say Elise Gluskova. There's one of those strange Cyrillic accents over the S in Gluskova, so I'm not sure how that changes, but that's what I'm going with. Minimal stuff over here in the Western market, but she did some backups in Harrow County over at Dark Horse. Harrow County is a horror book written by Cullen Bunn and drawn by Tyler Cook, 2 names that we've already discussed actually earlier for a number of other different projects that they've worked separately. But Harrow County is a pretty cool, real creepy kind of horror book, and she did some backups on that, which is neat. And then our final standalone is issue 32, drawn by Langdon Foss. Done some stuff over at Marvel, like the interior artist on Vote Loki, which is the Loki-based miniseries, and a Bucky Barnes Winter Soldier miniseries he was the interior artist on, and did a book over at Image with Alice Cott called The Surface. So done some stuff, created her own, there's at the time a pretty good mix of mainstream and indie stuff. And then, like I said, Joelle Jones goes and blows up and is now a humongous recognizable name in the comics industry. But at the time, no, wasn't someone that people probably may have really known when she guest starred for issue 7.
Yeah. I mean, huge name. That's one of those that I was heartbroken last year. She was supposed to be at a convention we were going to. I had pulled, I think I had narrowed it down to 10 books I was going to take to get signed. And she canceled with like 2 weeks out. And I was just like, all right, now I got to put these all back in the box.
Yeah, it's a bummer. She's really cool. I've been lucky to meet her at a couple shows. Very, very cool. Again, she's one of my favorite artists. I know she's doing some writing a lot more, which is always very fun to see. But she's someone that if she's got a cover of something, much like I mentioned with someone like Jorge Corona, if she does a cover or a variant or something like that, like I'm going to pick it up because I'm probably going to like it. And so to get her see her on an early work, a work earlier in her career, I think it's pretty cool. Even if it's just a one shot kind of. Again, not a fill-in per se, because those one shots are very specific, kind of out of time continuity. They're like flashback stories.
It's like time
of
before time. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We're jumping back to a different point to see some of the backstories of some of the characters that we see as kind of a break in between story arcs. And so, yeah, it was cool to see our name on this because I didn't know when I first read this book. I don't know if I knew who Joelle Jones was at the time. I may not have. But to read it now, like her name jumps off the page, so that's cool to see.
Yeah, that one hit me immediately, and then right after that, a guy who, for some reason, I don't know if he is in this part of the country or just does like GalaxyCon circuits, but Drew Moss has been nearby for several conventions.
Yeah,
and I've got a few things signed by him. Not a huge name, but he's got his name on some pretty big stuff these days.
Yeah, he does. And like I said, the licensed stuff over at Dynamite, that stuff sells. It has its fans, and so you're doing books on like I said, like Vampirella, Red Sonja, Thundercats. I mean, people love the fans of that stuff. Really love it, and so
TMNT. He's got Star Wars, Adventure, Star Trek. Yeah, I mean, and then Thundercats has been the big one with
exactly.
Declan.
Yeah, that's been the big one recently. Yep.
Which I actually heard is great. I wasn't a Thundercats guy as a kid, so I haven't haven't delved into that because there's so many other books, especially now of my childhood IP being made into great comics that I'm like, I can't afford to borrow someone else's childhood IP and also get into that. There's just only so many hours in the day, so many dollars in the bank account.
Only so many books you can read. But yes, it said those books have, they have their followings. It's very similar in my mind as something like Power Rangers, where growing up it was seen as kind of this campy, silly thing because it was. And then when those people who watched it grew up and started writing comics, they took it and turned it into something really cool. And the Power Ranger fans love the Power Rangers, and I think something like Thundercats or a very recent a book that started coming out, Captain Planet, has gotten very, very good reviews. So
Captain Planet with a beard.
Yeah, it's that sort of thing of like the generation that grew up with that as kids are now the people that are writing those stories in a new medium and bringing a different spin to it, and not that they have to like quote unquote take it seriously, but they're adding something to it that it's more than just what it was, as a.
I mean, you talk about campy with Power Rangers. Good Lord, Captain Planet, but absolutely. I loved it.
Yeah. So I'm not surprised someone like Drew Moss, you get on a book like that, and you've got steady work coming in because those books are going to sell. They're not going to crack the top 20 or whatever, but they're going to sell to that audience every month.
Right.
It's a known quantity in that way.
Yeah. And next up we have Ryan Kelly, who I don't know a lot of, but I did discover in pre-show research that he actually has inked one of my top 5 favorite issues of all time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which is issue 17 of The Unwritten.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Choose Your Own Adventure. He was the anchor for that. Mm-hmm. And like anyone associated with that issue of that book is one of my favorite. Like that's one of those, like I rescue that from dollar bins every time I find it because I think even if you're not reading The Unwritten, to pick up that issue and have the crazy page flipping experience of like, go for this, go to this page, for this, go to this page. And you have to like tilt the thing sideways. It was like the one thing that didn't work about the compendium.
Yes, it's tougher to read that. That's a tough one to read in trade in any collected edition. Anytime you got to turn an issue on its side, it's always harder in a collected form than it is single issue.
But yeah, so clearly a very talented guy, to get tapped by a creative team like, Carrie and Gross. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking forward to that issue. Again, I have not read this series. So, other than the first couple that I read.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess as we kind of we talked a little about what the summary is and a little tease of what's to come. I guess if you had to set an over under per episode of what you think our West Wing references are going to be, is there a number you think you can set? Because it is not the political aspect, the political side of this, the stuff that follows.
I mean,
President
even if
Blades'
it's not like
day-to-day
specific
stuff.
I think the most likely thing is that I will be saying like, oh, this is a very Hoynes type character, or this is the Leo, or this is the, you know.
It is it's hard not to look at the political side, we'll call like the Earth-based side of the story through that lens, because I really do feel that it's intentional, because so much of the book is about what it's like to, how do you run the country and or run the world if you know that there's something bigger out there, you know? And one thing I guess I can tease early on is the idea of like, what is fixing the economy or tackling any of the issues we have in our country or in our world, if in the back of your mind you're like, but there are aliens out there and they might have like a giant gun pointed at our planet, you know?
Yeah, I like how they're like, we don't know anything about it, but they're definitely putting a gun aimed at our planet. It's like, well, either you don't know anything about it, or either it's a massive gun. Those are two very different things.
Well,
but you also get to see the changing of political parties, and that was what made me think of Independence Day. Was you know, there were the alarmist, and then there was the presumably ex-military, presumably liberal president, who was like young and liberal, and he was like, well, you know, let's send up the little helicopters and do the light signals, and
do the,
you know, let's not assume they're hostile while they're hovering over the White House.
Well, but there is a part of this that is like, wherever they're from, we can't get there, they can get here. So no matter what we do, we're technologically inferior. You know, so that is an inherent fear about any sort of potential extraterrestrial invasion story, right?
Right.
That regardless of whether or not they are friendly or hostile or indifferent, we are automatically technologically inferior because we can't do the thing that they did, and that is a basis of a lot of just inherent fears. And I think what this book does really well, and it sets up early on, is how different people, not necessarily through different political parties, but how different people in different positions handle and address what that fear is. Of like, how do you keep going with the day to day when you know there's something bigger and greater out there? Well, again, whether or not it's hostile or not, that's actually immaterial to the conversation. Just knowing that there's something bigger out there to even just explore. Like, how do you still like, okay, well, we got to fix unemployment here, you know?
Right.
We got to put funds on that, or do we got to put funds in figuring out what the hell is up in the astro? You know, so that balance.
But there's also, I think,
that attempted balance.
One of the potent things that I'm sure we'll get into next week is, I think it's a distinctly American story to say, someone's out there, don't know if they're friends or hostile. Either way, we need a bigger stick. Like, we can't be friends with someone unless we also have the upper hand.
Well, and the big
it's
thing,
like that's the most American government take you can have.
And the one step further, I'll take that, and we'll definitely get into this, is not just that we need a bigger stick. We need a bigger stick that only we know about.
Yes.
We need a bigger stick that's our stick. We're not going to go to the rest of the world and say, hey, the world need a bigger stick. It's no. The stick is ours. We're going to have the stick. That's a highly American thing. And I think that is an interesting part that plays into the story that Soul and Alburquerque kind of weave in, and kind of toy with the idea of that idea of American exceptionalism, you know, and playing with that idea. And what does that look like when it's blown up into this metaphor of potential alien invasion or first contact? So there's a lot of juicy stuff to get into. I said both on the straight science fiction side and on the straight political drama side, which is a really fun and interesting mashup that honestly I can't wait to get in with you, knowing that what our shared love of in terms of various types of genre stories and whatnot, and one of those genres being
in addition to reading, you know, the first 2 volumes, first 12 issues, whatever the breakdown is.
Yeah.
people should just go ahead and binge all 7 seasons of The West Wing before next week's episode.
Probably 2, yeah, and probably watch as much Star Trek as you can, just in case.
Yeah, it can't hurt to watch. Now,
Yeah.
Are you an original series, or are you all Star Trek indiscriminately, or are you Next Generation?
I am Star Trek movies.
Okay. Okay.
Original cast all the way through, but I my only real connection with Star Trek is in the movies. I'm not I'm never a series watcher. So like watching Next Gen or anything like that, it was never something that was in my bag. But I've seen every Star Trek movie multiple times. My dad was a big Star Trek guy, original series stuff. So I've only ever seen, though, even limited episodes of the original series as well. So never really my bag, but I have, proficient knowledge in Star Trek lore. Proficient, maybe barely proficient knowledge in Star Trek lore. So
okay. I did watch the entire original series. I've never seen Next Generation, which people think's appalling. And then I've seen all of the Chris Pine movies, and then I've seen all of the ones with the original cast.
Yeah. So we'll get into that, because again, the sci-fi aspects, the space parts of this, the parts of the stories that follow the astronauts that are attempting to make contact, like that is like hard sci-fi, and there are references to all sorts of things in science fiction, popular culture, just spread throughout, that I actually really do have questions on that I really want to get into. We'll get into that specifics next week there, but it seems like a weird dichotomy of like hard sci-fi and hard political thriller, but the way that they get those two stories to mesh together and make it feel cohesive, I think is really brilliant and really, really interesting. So I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah. Do we still need to hit Elise and Langdon?
I mentioned them. We're good.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yes, and then Dave Pascal. Okay, that is everybody aside from your production design for the companion edition, editor.
Yeah.
Those things. If you're really interested, you
Sports
can email
staff,
us, and we'll drop it into a future episode.
Yeah. Very important, but in terms of creative aspect, what's on the page, we listed everyone we need to get through. So.
Yeah, that, and if you're reading the Deluxe editions, you won't even have the benefit of seeing the contributors to the compendium edition.
Yeah.
So anyway, well, thank you for listening. We are super excited to dive into this one. Brush up on your West Wing. Follow us on Blue Sky, Instagram, and read. Now, sorry, God, I just lost it. The issue breakdown. This is where
next
I lose
week, issues 1 through 12.
1 through 12.
1 through 12. Yes. If you have the compendium, read 1 through 12. That is the first 2 arcs. Plus one of the first of the standalone issues there. So issues 1 through 12, and we'll stop it right there.
Beautiful. We'll see you next week, issues 1 through 12, and enjoy your reading.
Peace.